designer based in Google Seattle, and Dustin Smith, a UX researcher also based in Google Seattle. We're going to present 3 topics today. I'm going to talk about the development of PolyGerrit, why we're making PolyGerrit, and what we've done over the past 2 years. Arnab is going to present a new visual design that we're going to start rolling out on googlesource.com and in the next release of Gerrit. And Dustin's going to present some of the findings from research. I think many of you in this room may have received a survey and responded to that. We're also doing some research during this summit, so there are ways that you can help us out today and tomorrow. So what is PolyGerrit? What I have here is the very first commit that landed in the Gerrit project that added PolyGerrit. It was founded by Andrew Bonventry from the Chromium project. And his commit message sums it up pretty well. The idea is to replace the existing UI based in Google Web Toolkit, or GWT, and replace it with a new UI built with a modern JavaScript framework with just straight up HTML and JavaScript. And also part of the motivation, not just to replace the UI and make it look better, but also help the Chromium project move to Gerrit. So Polymer is pretty important to PolyGerrit. It's part of the name. The Polymer project, it's not really a framework. It's a collection of libraries and tools and components that are developed by Chrome at Google. And the idea is to build really nice web applications on top of web standards, on top of the standard web platform. Some important aspects of the web platform that we use are web components, which are built on top of HTML templates that you can import into your HTML file, and Shadow DOM, which is a way of, well, one of the things that Shadow DOM offers is encapsulation of your style sheets in an HTML template. So we can build reusable components. So another big aspect of the Polymer project are collections of what they call custom elements. And they've organized them in groups that they gave like chemistry themed names to. We use iron elements pretty heavily. They're like basic building blocks for HTML. And we're starting to use elements from their paper collection, which are higher level UI elements that introduce material design. They look really nice. They're high level reusable elements. That lets us focus on developing code review without having to rebuild everything from scratch. You have a question? Sure. The question is if I could expand on what material design means. I'm probably not the best person to sell you on material design, but it's kind of a, I don't know, how would you describe it, Arnab?
So material design is basically a new design language that Google had come up with in 2015. And it basically just it's a library of all the modern components with great look and feel and stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much all I can say.
And it comes with a lot of features like animations and smooth transitions. It makes your UI more dynamic, and it's kind of hard to show in slides all that dynamism. But so we've been working on PolyGerrit for 2 years now, almost exactly 2 years, I think. And in that time, we've gotten a lot of contributions outside of the core project. So we have a few dozen contributors. We've checked in thousands of commits, and we've closed almost 1,000 issues from our issue tracker. As far as I know, there's no significant deployment of PolyGerrit outside of Google yet, but we do use it. And Gerrit Hub, great. But we have been using it at Google for a while, and at this point we see about 10,000 code reviews a day involving PolyGerrit, at least on a work day. And we've got a few major open source projects using it. Chromium has recently transitioned over to PolyGerrit. They bring about 2,000 developers, and that's really good for the Gerrit project. I put up a few other recognizable open source projects. Go is a really significant one as well. And also the Gerrit project itself. We configured gerritreview.googlesource.com to use PolyGerrit by default. And that helps us get a lot of early feedback on the design and functionality of PolyGerrit. So a little bit more about Chromium. This was a really significant milestone for our team, and I think also for the Gerrit project. So Chromium, they have a very complex system for checking in code, for testing it, for doing builds that they've built themselves, and they used to run their own code review system as well, based on Rietveld. Unfortunately, this is like sort of an unmaintained instance of Rietveld running on App Engine. They didn't really want to like use that anymore, and it also wasn't scaling very well for them. And they even had like, there would be commits that they couldn't even review in that system because they were too large. So a lot of what we've been working on in that time is getting Gerrit into a state where Chromium could use it. Part of that was building a nice UI, and also part of it was taking features that they enjoy from Rietveld and bringing them over to Gerrit. So some of those features are things like, some of them are small things like having user account statuses, so you can tell people that you're not in the office and can't do your code reviews this week, or having comments on your, or descriptions for your patch sets to help explain what each revision means. And they also built a lot of interesting customizations. They've helped us flesh out our plugin API, and I'll show one example here. So Chromium has a pretty heavyweight continuous integration system, because they have to build Chrome for a lot of different platforms, a lot of different architectures, and they have a lot of incoming commits. So they have to find a way to verify that a commit that's coming in will actually work, and in which order to actually check in those changes so as not to break the build. So one thing they built for PolyGerrit is a plugin that adds this element to the screen that gives them visibility into what's going on in that system. So they can see all the builds that are running for their commit, the statuses. Often they're flaky, so that's really important to see, or to have control over, like, you know, you can click on these and see the output of the build, and you can also use this UI to start particular builds. You can choose which architectures you want to run on, or you can rerun things that have failed. I think we should build better integration into Gerrit for this sort of thing. I think this is something that every major project needs, and so do small projects. But it's kind of cool what we were able to do with plugins as they are now. So one thing I want to go over is just what's new in Gerrit 2.15 with PolyGerrit. So Gerrit 2.14 was the first release that included PolyGerrit, but it was kind of just an experimental preview. I don't think it worked very well out of the box. And since then we've fixed tons and tons of bugs. We've added some features. I think we have like over 250 issues that we closed in that time. We converted the entire project over to ES6, which for JavaScript developers just makes life so much easier, and also makes the project more attractive to other contributors. We made a lot of performance improvements in the application. For example, sometimes we get commits that come in that have thousands of files, and we need to display them intelligently. You can't just throw them all on the screen. That'll take a while. So we had to build in some new navigation for those sorts of things. And we've tried to adapt PolyGerrit to just work for code reviews of all shapes and sizes. So I'll go into some specific things we've added that I think are kind of nice. So here's one thing. So PolyGerrit offers a reply dialog that lets you manage reviewers, reply to comments, and vote on labels, and submit that all as a single batch operation. So we've added some nice features to that dialog since 2.14. One of those is being able to preview how your reply will be formatted. So not only does this show you what your reply is going to look like in the application, but this is also pretty much what it looks like in the emails that go out now that we have HTML emails. We've also kind of reorganized how voting buttons are arranged. So there's like this nice vertical alignment, and you can see the labels that give you the meaning of what +1 means for that label. We have a slightly updated patch set selector. And this is really important because one of the things that people struggle with, I think, is navigating a code review, especially as there are more patches, and understanding where all the comments are, because comments land on different patch sets. We also introduced a feature called resolvable comments, so you can mark a comment as fixed or done, and we keep track of that for you. So you can see that on some patch set, there's some comment you haven't replied to yet, or as a reviewer, you can kind of verify that everything's been addressed. Another major area that we've been working on lately is one of the major feature gaps in PolyGerrit compared to the old UI is admin. So a lot of our users have had to switch back and forth a lot if they have to do any admin work. So we've been building out this part of the application. We've rearranged things a little bit, so we've changed how you navigate through admin. You access this view by clicking on the browse link in the top menu. And our idea here is that this is how you get to like the project homepage for a repository, where you get the checkout instructions, and that's also the entry point to actually administer the project. We have most of the basic forms for managing groups and projects completed. And we've also released a read-only version of the complex project access rules editor. It's read-only mode because we don't want to risk anybody messing up their project config if there's a bug in this, because this is a very project configs tend to be very security sensitive. But we're almost there. So that takes me to what's next for PolyGerrit. We're still working on replacing the GWT UI. We're getting close. One of the major features remaining is inline edit. We'll be working on that over the next few months, as well as just the long tail of specific missing pieces from the GWT UI. And then we're going to roll out a new visual design, which Arnab will be talking about shortly. And we also want to do, in the longer term, more significant changes to the user experience of Gerrit, especially around how accessible it is to new users. We find that once people start using Gerrit, they love it, but that initial learning curve is a little difficult. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Arnab, who's going to introduce the new design.
So thanks, Logan, for giving an awesome introduction to PolyGerrit and what's next. So like Logan mentioned, that we are kind of working on a new look. And I'll just be giving you a quick glimpse of the new look that Logan mentioned. And we know that Gerrit and now PolyGerrit works really well for the users, but we want to really improve the overall usability as well as aesthetics of the tool. And now for improving usability, we definitely think that there's a longer process. We definitely don't want to break what's already working for you. And so it'll be more of an evolutionary process grounded by more research and feedback. However, we thought that we can definitely start by looking at the aesthetics of PolyGerrit and giving it a new look. So a few key goals that we had in mind at the onset were design that should communicate the essence of what PolyGerrit is and what it stands for, having more contained groups of information so you know instantly that where you need to look to find a particular piece of information. Also a more consistent UI behavior across the board, and the moment you look at a component, you should just know that what you can expect, what you can expect it to do. Also a more current style of components and fonts, which Logan kind of touched upon, was basically material design. So now what should really drive the experience that we want to create is what we really want to achieve with PolyGerrit, right? So the first thing is confidence. We definitely want you to be confident about the code that you are submitting, the code that's going out there. Scalability. We want PolyGerrit to support the large and very complicated changes as well as the smaller changes. Efficiency. We want to increase the efficiency of your team as well as make the code review process efficient, more efficient. Intelligence. So PolyGerrit should be smart enough to do all the repetitive tasks that you have to do on your behalf. And wisdom. PolyGerrit should definitely, help you share your wisdom in the team. So one color that really captures all these all these very well is blue. So we picked blue and made it the primary color of PolyGerrit. So again, like this will be the default primary color, but then definitely you can change it for your team. Okay, so here's presenting the new and refreshed look of PolyGerrit. Can you see it properly? Cool. So now there are three distinct layouts from a UI perspective in PolyGerrit, which is essentially this screen, which is the chain screen. Then we have the dashboards and the admin screens that Logan touched upon. And this being the most used screen in PolyGerrit, we kind of thought that why not just start by giving this a new look. And so for this presentation, I'll just be talking about how the new PolyGerrit style kind of works on it. So let's just talk about the various visual elements on this page and look at them in a little bit of detail. So one of the things that we have added in PolyGerrit is this breadcrumb, which just helps you easily jump back to wherever you came from. I mean, it won't. If you came from an email client, it won't help you jump back to that. But I mean, to the previous page, definitely, yeah. So the next is the status. So now we have a very clear status indication for the change, so that when you are just looking at this page, just by looking at this page in a single glance, you can tell that whether this change is open or merged or so on and so forth. And the colored line above also kind of adds to this whole indication of the change. So let's talk a little bit about the metadata section of this page. And we now have a much more defined visual structure in terms of spacing, fonts, and colors, and also actions. The actions are now material design flat buttons. So if you see these all caps, add CC or add assignee, these are material design flat buttons. And they are not, they are different from links, as in the links wouldn't be all caps and they'll be different font altogether. So you can visually tell the difference between what will take you to another space or another page and what will actually take an action. So when you click on the add assignee, you kind of get this inline edit box, which lets you enter the add assignee and just save or cancel. And this is just, I think, a more elegant way of inputting the inline data, because it just makes the action so much more clear. And once you have entered, you can just see that you can just click on save and see that assignee name populated right next to the assignee label. And once you start typing, this is how the suggestions work. It will just suggest you the names based on whatever you have typed. And topics also work in the same way. Now coming to perhaps arguably the most used section on this page, which is the file table. And you will notice that, I don't know how many of you have seen PolyGerrit. In PolyGerrit, we essentially have these two header rows. The row where you can see the file, the file heading. We have two rows like that. And what we have done here, we have just combined all the information in those two rows into this one row. And let's look at some of the elements of this particular section. So the first element is the path set selector. Now we have both the path set selector, the selected path set as well as reference path set, kind of together side by side. So you don't have to look all the way to the right to select the reference path set. Once you click on the path set drop down, you basically have a different layout for this particular drop down menu. On the left hand side, you can see the path set name as well as the path set description. And the right hand side, you can see the comments and the unresolved comments. So this just makes scanning through this list so much more easier, especially if this list is long. Then adding path set description also works in a very same way. It just shows up an inline edit box, and you can just enter the path set description and say save. Now moving on, we now have a hover state and a different interaction for marking the files as read or as reviewed. So what happens is that when you kind of hover on these rows, the mark as reviewed shows up on the right-hand side. And when you click it, you can see a column on the left of mark as reviewed, which has the text reviewed. So when you click on mark as reviewed, this reviewed text shows up, and this is kind of a toggle button. So when you click on it again, it will say mark as or mark unreviewed, and when you click on mark unreviewed, the reviewed text goes away. Okay, so on the top right, we now have the table actions, and we just have 2 actions by default. So the first action is expand all, and the other one is download. Now, when you click on expand all, you essentially see this inline diff view expanded, and you can notice some of these icons have appeared on the top. So basically, the expand all button changes into collapse all. And the diff views, now you can have icons to switch between your side-by-side diff view or unified diff view, or even launch the diff view settings or preferences. So that's pretty much. And again, I know that this is just a very small step towards what we can do, and it's just the tip of an iceberg. And I think we will definitely reach out to you for more feedback, for doing more research, and like really making PolyGerrit a tool that you would love to use as a code review tool. So with that, I'll just hand over to Dustin.
All right, thanks, Arnab. So my name is Dustin, and I'm a user researcher at Google. And so what does that mean? Well, my job is essentially to communicate with our users, and then take what you tell me and distill that into what we need to do, what changes we need to make to our product. I then advocate for all of you in meetings, because I'm not a developer, I'm not a designer. My role is essentially just communicate what do you need to our developers, to PMs, and to designers. And then I collect feedback on what we take from your feedback. So I'll distill your needs. Arnab will come up with some new designs, and then I'll bring them back to you. And I'll say, okay, well, how did we do based on your feedback? And so that's kind of what we'll be doing for the next 2 days, at least if you're talking to me. And then we'll repeat that process to infinity. And that is ideally how research gets integrated into design. So if you're not a member of this Google group, I highly recommend it, because one, you can yell at us there and say that you really don't like what's going on in the product, or you can praise us, whichever you like. But sometimes I'll send out surveys through here, and you can participate in some hopefully not too long surveys that will really help us aggregate all of your needs. So an example of that, we sent out a survey in June, and about 600 of you responded, and so hopefully maybe some of you remember that. Probability says there's at least some of you in here that took that survey. And so we heard a lot of nice praise in that survey, and that's great, but we're also looking for ways that we can improve Gerrit. And so what we did is we asked you to rank, like if we had improvements that we could make, what would be your high priority with respect to the others? And if any of you are stats nerds like myself, this is done with a technique called maxdiff. And if you're not stats nerds, which is okay, no judgment, it's a really fancy way to do ranking where you don't have to go through and rank this list all at once, which can be really annoying. So I just feed you these improvements piecemeal, and you only have to look at a few of them. And then from all of your feedback, we essentially take that and we set ranked preference points with respect to all the other potential improvements that you could do. So, but what you see at the top here is that you all, or the people that fill out the survey, are really interested in us improving the navigation of Gerrit, whether that's patch set navigation or commenting, in general UI navigation. But there's also a key one there that is better integration with other tools. And so we're definitely hearing that feedback. Something to keep in mind is that if you see there at the bottom axis, there are things at 0. That doesn't mean that you don't want those things, but they're relatively ranked. So from the people that we talk to, people are really interested in us working on better navigation and tool integration. Just some highlights from that. Oh, sorry, Arnab.
I'm wondering what groups of users you have asked this to, because the one completely at the bottom, it says improve reliability of the backend, and also very much at the bottom is better performance, and that's kind of what our team is continuously worried about. And even yesterday, as we had the hackathon, our friends in the Android team kind of destroyed our system on a Sunday morning, and we were all in panic. And so I see that no one cares about this. So how so?
Okay. That's a fair question. So who did we sample? Most of these users were external users of Gerrit, and only 13 of them were PolyGerrit users. So what you're looking at here are about 95% external Gerrit users. That said, why would they rank better performance and reliability the lowest? I'm not sure how to answer that question.
For us, obviously, reliability of the back end is important, but the question was, does the reliability need improving? And for us, Gerrit works quite well, and we're very happy with that.
Yeah, I believe that the answer is really similar to that. First of all, the people you're asking to. So you are not asking to Gerrit administrators. You are not asking to Gerrit maintainers or contributors, but just people that are using the GUI. So the people that are using the GUI, they say, to be honest with you, the reliability is 99.99%. Do you want to make it 99.999999%? I don't really care. That is not the point to improve. The point to improve is what you guys are doing. That is usability, discoverability, and leveraging all the power that is there and it's not used. Yeah, that's my answer to that question.
Yeah, that's a great point. And keep in mind that this list, again, the items that are on the lower end of this ranking, it doesn't mean that people don't like it. It's that all of the other potential improvements are ranked above it. So it's people didn't say, I dislike the idea of better performance. But more often than not, people selected the options above it before better performance. Okay, so I'll pull out just a few highlights. So just some people, maybe you, but anonymously, navigation is important. So getting an overview of the change I'm reviewing is hard. When a change is done in several files, the file navigation feels like a pain. And so we're taking this feedback and we're moving forward. And also some complaints about search itself. So search could be better. For example, I want to search a commit that included a particular file. And then integration. It would be nice to have more Jenkins integration for passing code, coverage, quality, report statistics to Gerrit. So if these quotes that I pulled out are gelling with you, wonderful. If they're not, if you feel like there are things that are missing, like you're not being heard, I'm definitely the person to talk to. I will make sure that you are heard. But we also have some other options that I wanted to show you. How many of you are aware of this link, user research at Google? No? If you'd like to, you can sign up here. And what we'll do is essentially provide you opportunities to look at our new designs and get gifts for it. So you could spend an hour with me, maybe 30 minutes, however busy you are, and I'll show you some of Arnab's new designs, and then you'll get a gift as like for your time. And we hold these year-round. I'm not the only researcher at Google, and I'm certainly not the only product that's supported by this. So all of Google products are hosted on here, and there are probably 100 user researchers willing to talk to you. But I'm interested in hearing your feedback about Gerrit, and I run studies on here, and you're welcome to join me. And then today and tomorrow, we have a booth that you might have seen already with this banner. And we have a new dashboard design that you're welcome to give us feedback on, that Arnab put together. We have a new patch set navigation that Arnab also put together that we'd love for you to look at, and a new design for related changes. So, and we're not showing you them in the slides on purpose, mainly because we don't want you to simmer on the designs and then come with us with a bunch of feedback before you look at it. Like we want your first impression when you're looking at the UI. So please come to the booth and talk to any of us. There are quite a few of us. Jason here is with us, and he's our PM, and you're welcome to talk to him as well. And almost all of the Googlers here are willing to show you some of these new designs. So please walk right up, don't be shy, and help us out. Any questions?
I'm just interested how exactly you come up with new design, with layout, how to make it better. How do you know that it's better or the user experience is better comparing to the old UI?
That's a great question. So on the coming up with the new concepts, so I take what you say are your pain points, what you love, and I tell Arnab. And then Arnab comes up with the new concepts, and then your question is, how do you know if it's better? Typically, you generate representative tasks, so things that you would commonly do in any UI, and then we do what are called task-based assessments, and we get people to go through those tasks and see if they fail them, and they're giving us like think aloud feedback as they're doing the task and letting us know, oh, I really don't like this compared to the last UI, or they say, wow, this is really great. And then from that, you do like essentially a mini A/B test, right, with just a few people. And that way you don't have to actually build out the entire product and release it and then see that everyone hates it. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, so the question was, maybe it's early days so you don't know the answer, but it's more for all the audience. So I remember when a couple of years ago there was this announcement that we're going to have this new project, PolyGerrit. It's all done with Polymer, and that was great. Andrew came. Actually, he didn't came, but it was Dave Borowitz that was just presenting on his behalf because it was on the other side of the US. And we were all asked for, okay, when the new GUI is going to be available? And the answer was, yeah, maybe 6, maybe 12 months. Then after 2 years, we've got something that works, that is PolyGerrit. And we started using it, and we like it. There are still some gaps that, from my point of view, they're not really on the change screen. The change screen is way better than the old one, even because I can use it on my tube in the morning, so I can use it on my mobile phone. And if people are commuting, maybe with public transports, that's absolutely great. And the old GUI didn't even render on the mobile phone. It was so tiny you couldn't see it. But the gap that I see is more on the other side. So people, when they use Gerrit, some of them they're using for code reviews, but I will say another 50% of them, they are using as a very good, reliable Git server. So have you put into your user research or into your rather the other use cases that at the moment they are still not completely covered by PolyGerrit? For instance, the online edit, the code browsing, the user journeys from the code to the review, from the review to the code, the integrated search between the two, and so on. So what are your plans on the parts that are not the change screen? Because from my point of view, the change screen in the current PolyGerrit is great. I use it every day. I love it.
I'll try to answer some of that, and maybe Jason can help me a little too. So some things are clearly in the scope of Gerrit, and some things maybe are not. But that does not mean we're not interested in that. So source browsing, I think, is one example of that, where I don't think that will be in PolyGerrit, but we are interested in better ways of browsing source code. We are working on inline edit. It's maybe not something we've really looked at the usability of yet. It's a little bit lower on the list of priorities, but we are starting with the implementation, and Arnab has actually been helping us with some of the basic design elements of that, so that it'll be a basic feature at first, but it will look nice and will be usable to some extent. and then we will iterate. Does that answer some of your questions? I know there's other features you mentioned.
My question was really on the complete new redesign. So are your efforts more in completing what is there, or just reinventing everything from the ground up, and then we need to wait another 2 years or whatever?
Well, we're definitely focused in the immediate term on completing PolyGerrit because for various technical reasons, we want to replace the GWT UI. And we also want to get more users using PolyGerrit so we can get this feedback cycle going. And as we get more and more feedback and we get more iterations of PolyGerrit out there in the wild, we will obviously come up with a lot more work for us to do. So yeah, in the near term, we're going to be implementing what Arnab presented. And while we're doing that, Arnab will be working with Dustin to collect more feedback on some of the other things that you will see at the booth around like the dashboard and other areas of the application, and we're going to keep working on that. So it's not like we will put out, it's not like PolyGerrit's going to stay static the way it is today for years, and then you're going to get a new design in 2 years. It's going to be an incremental process, at least on Google and on Gerrit's master branch. I think each release cycle of Gerrit, the open source project, will include some major improvements in user experience.
Hi, I'm just wondering how are the new users get represented in your user research? Not necessarily just people from GitHub or GitLab, but maybe even other source control like Perforce or SVN.
How do they get represented?
Yeah. Yes.
Is that a question of how do they participate in giving feedback?
How do you get collect or capture the experience? Because a lot of us use it for a while and we understand the nitty-gritty of Gerrit, but a lot of the time onboarding new user is kind of a pain point. And they only a new user for a very short time, right?
So your question is in terms of onboarding. So when you have a new user. That's definitely on my roadmap, is getting people who've never used our product before to walk through some of our representative tasks. And that would be kind of the recipe. Is just finding people that have never used the product and then working with Arnab based on their feedback of what we need to change to make that process smoother. So hopefully that answers your question.
Sorry, my question was, how much investigation and research are you doing into other code review tools and maybe their UIs and their advantages or disadvantages over Gerrit?
It's definitely an approach that I'm willing to take, is some kind of competitive analysis. Not yet, but it's certainly on the roadmap for research to do.
Excuse me. If there are other code review tools you've used and you think do certain things really well, and you think that Gerrit or PolyGerrit could benefit from that knowledge or from that improvement, please let us know. There's nothing is off the table here with respect to what will improve or what we'll consider improving. So if you've used other code review tools and wow, reviewable.io's got this really awesome thing, you should really do something similar to that. By all means, let us know, right? Because we don't necessarily think that PolyGerrit is the be all end all of code review experiences. So we're open to improvements in all areas.
I'll follow up on this because there will be actually, I think, a talk tomorrow. But some of our friends, they're working with Gerrit Code Review, the guys from CollabNet, they've got clients, they are using not just Gerrit, they're using GitHub, they're using many other systems. And many of them, they've got this concern that, oh gosh, where is my pull request? So because maybe they are coming from other tools, they're coming from GitHub or from Atlassian Stash, Bitbucket, whatever, they've got this concept that without a pull request, they are lost. And they have this misconception that Gerrit forces you to amend the commit all the time. That is wrong, because Gerrit allows you to do whatever you want. Do you want to amend the commit? You amend the commit. Do you want to use feature branches? You use feature branches. Remember that Martin last year was saying that they use feature branches. There is nothing wrong with that. So the guys from CollabNet, they build a kind of very basic GUI, but that allows people coming from pull request to use Gerrit, but with the pull request paradigm. That doesn't mean that the GUI is completely different, but it means it's a kind of lightweight way to start digesting Gerrit gradually. And I believe that was the aim of the discussion as well recently on the Go project. So the Google Go project went into a discussion, it was a few days ago, on GitHub where someone say, oh, hey guys, why don't we just stop using Gerrit? We start using GitHub. And then I followed the discussion, and at the end of the day, the problem was not really that Gerrit is not good. It's the opposite. They were saying, listen, Gerrit is great. And that's exactly what we want, and GitHub doesn't. But their concerns was for people that are willing to contribute to the Go project, but they're coming from GitHub. Maybe they've got these, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour, maybe one day of studying they need to do to learn a different way that the GUI paradigm works. Because at the end of the day, the concepts are always the same. They've got slightly different names, but they are the same. In the Google Go community, basically they were saying, if we use GitHub, we don't have this problem. Not because the GUI is better, but because they're used to it. So is there any attempt for you guys to take into consideration even how to make the transition from people that are coming from pull request into Gerrit smoother, easier, and just maybe simpler to implement? Not say that we need to do the GitHub clone, no. But how can we make Gerrit easier to understand for those guys?
No, that's a great question. And as the former product manager for the Go programming language product, I've heard from many in the Go contributor community that they were relatively unwilling to contribute. And I think where we saw, at least in the Go project, that disparity was in the class of users I call the sort of casual contributors. So someone who came across the Go project said, oh, there's a typo in the docs, I just want to fix it really quickly. You know, in the GitHub user experience, which is really nice, they click fork, they use a web-based editor to edit a single line in a single file, they click, you know, create pull request, and it goes through a fairly simple or a really, really simple review process, and it gets merged, and like, okay, I'm done, right? They never even had to clone the repository locally, didn't have to figure out any of the authentication bits. It was super simple. You know, whether or not we want to take Gerrit down a path that makes those sort of casual contributions super simple is something, you know, we're open to. Like if that's a demand that, you know, the Gerrit community thinks is an important capability. At the same time, I don't think we necessarily want to displace GitHub with Gerrit, right? You know, there's a huge community there, and for a reason. But there are certainly workflows like the casual contributor workflow that are much easier in GitHub, much more of a challenge for users who are new to Gerrit. So that's definitely an area where if there's a need for it, we should think about, or at least consider how we might support such a thing. So I think we're open to hearing more feedback on things like that.
Yeah, so I just came from the OpenStack kind of developers summit in Colorado a couple of weeks ago, and we were having almost exactly the same conversation in terms of onboarding contributors to OpenStack, which uses Gerrit, and you know, we're getting a lot of people coming from the GitHub world and having the same kind of getting over the Gerrit hurdle. And one of the things that was discussed there is having some documentation, like a quick start, you know, cheat sheet, crash course type thing for people who are familiar with GitHub and want to come over. So I think it's not just about enhancing Gerrit's code to make it more friendly and to support, you know, workflows that they're used to, but also just providing content that helps people coming over.
Let's see, where's Dave? Oh, there he is, okay. So Dave is one of the tech writers at Google who's specifically working on code review. So if you have specific parts of the documentation set that you think, or new parts of the documentation set that could be useful to new users, please talk to Dave sometime during the next day or two. We'd be happy to hear it.
I actually already started, I built, actually you've seen it already, a spreadsheet as a kind of Rosetta Stone, just like mapping concepts and commands and things between one to the other. So I'll show you that, and we can, that's just, you know, one approach, but I think some pros as well will help.
Well, thank you very much.